Welcome to Grad Guidance, career tips and tools for graduate students. I'm your host, Allie Irk, Associate Director of Graduate Student Career Development at Lehigh University.
In this episode, we'll be discussing proposal writing, featuring Kate Bullard, Research Program Development Officer in the Office of the Vice President and Associate Provost for Research and Graduate Studies.
Welcome to Grad Guidance. I'm Allie Irk. Today, we're going to be discussing proposal writing with our guest, Kate Bullard. Welcome, Kate.
Hi, nice to be here.
So glad that you could take time to talk today. So before we start talking about proposal writing, I was wondering if you could talk about your current role and your professional background.
My official title is Research Program Development Officer, and I work directly for the Vice President for Research. My job is to help faculty to figure out ways to fund their research, to improve their proposal writing. We also manage a whole suite of internal grants that are open to faculty to support research of all types on campus. So that's everything from what you might think of as a traditional lab to archival work, to travel, which obviously no one is doing right now, and to costs associated with book publishing. So it's all of that. And in terms of my background, my PhD is in history. I was a faculty member at one time and did some other things and ended up here. I will say, since this is a career-focused discussion, that I did not go straight to grad school. And even when I was in graduate school, I was always sort of doing other things and improving my skills in other areas. And that is one of the reasons that I was able to pivot out of an academic career or a traditional academic career into something different. So I definitely, and I think that proposal writing is actually an area that is a skill that can be used outside of academia, and that's always really helpful.
Excellent. I appreciate you sharing your background and certainly highlighting those transferable skills, and I'm so glad to have you here at Lehigh. So I wanted to start by saying, if you could explain a little bit more about proposal writing, and also why should graduate students be thinking about this?
That is a really good question. So proposal writing is in many ways something that forces you to really distill your ideas in a simple form. Proposal writing is something that's almost, you're sort of putting out there what you would like to do, what you maybe haven't done yet, and trying to make it as compelling as possible to the reader. Now, that is something that we need to use all of the time. We need it in all of our writing, whether it is an email to a prospective employer, whether it is something where you're going to talk about your ideas at a conference. Being able to distill down your ideas into something that is compelling, often that has less jargon, is really important. Oftentimes academia is about building up your jargon and becoming more and more kind of specialized. Proposal writing asks you to take a step back and to clarify your ideas for a broader audience. Generally speaking, the people who evaluate proposals, and for this I mean fellowship proposals in particular, they tend to not be specialized. So you really have to make an argument for why your work is important in a way that isn't just going to be, understandable. I'll use my example for historians of the American social welfare state. Like I would have had to, if I was writing a proposal for my own work, make it compelling maybe to the broad range of historians or social scientists or humanists.
Yeah, those are excellent points. Certainly communication is critical, whatever discipline, and writing is an important skill to develop, especially as you pointed out, being able to articulate your ideas for a really wide audience. So yeah. I wanted to focus in on, what do you see as some of the benefits and challenges associated with proposal writing?
So I would say, so there's a few things. So first of all, I think for people in the humanities, there's kind of like why should I bother? Fellowships are incredibly competitive. And this is true in every field, but especially in the humanities. They're incredibly competitive. And there's a sense that, what's the point? I'm not going to get it. It doesn't matter. But the truth is somebody has to get it. So why not you? And second, for the reasons that I laid out, it can be really useful to practice. For those graduate students who are going into STEM fields, proposal writing is your future. When you set up your lab as a new faculty member, some of the first things that you have to do is to put in proposals. You need to collect your preliminary data, and then you need to be writing proposals. So all of that those are skills that you don't want to be learning your first year as a tenure track faculty member. You don't have time. You need to hone those skills. And I think a lot of faculty members are really good about, encouraging their students to write proposals, but you also need to be looking for that on your own, because that's a skill too. You need to find the funding, you need to see where it is. So those are all good skills.
Definitely. I loved how you pointed out that it's important in a variety of disciplines, right? So, because we're talking to a wide audience right now, and certainly whichever field or discipline you find yourself, it's great to be proactive.
It is. And honestly, jobs like mine exist all over the country. So if you are a humanist who is interested in this sort of thing, writing proposals as a graduate student and thinking about proposal writing, that's the kind of thing that often there are literally jobs for proposal writers especially at larger universities that put in much bigger proposals. This is something that you could do as your job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, another excellent point. So, and sometimes you don't know your own skills until you give it a try, right? So until you prototype,
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, I think if you're somebody who, is interested, I think science communications is sort of a hot topic right now. If you're really interested in that, proposal writing is a good way to practice, kind of de-jargoning your science, or, I think we're really seeing a lot of growth in that area.
Mm-hmm, definitely. So I think we definitely covered the benefits, and I'm wondering what would be some of the steps that you think students could take to be successful if they're just getting started.
So if you're just getting started, first you want to figure out, obviously, what you're going to apply to. And we've included some resources. Allie's included resources with this that include the SPIN database, where you can search for opportunities. One of the nice things about the SPIN database is that you can select for citizenship. So if you are not an American citizen, you don't have to kind of weed through everything and realize at the end of it, oh, I'm not eligible. So those are really helpful. The NSF has a graduate research fellowship that is that very early stage graduate students are eligible for. That's a good standard fellowship application. NIH also has a kind of early career graduate application. So any of those are a good place to start. And you want to start by really reading everything very carefully to make sure you're eligible, to make sure it works. And then you want to focus in on the criteria. How is the proposal going to be judged? And think about how you can kind of create a proposal that answers those questions, because that's how the reviewers are going to judge it. That's how they're going to think it through. That's how they're going to score it.
Yeah, those are great tips. So since you mentioned funding, I'm wondering what factors play into funding. If you could talk a little bit about that.
So it's a little bit different. Fellowships and grants are a little bit different. Fellowships are really about kind of faith in the researcher, a sense that this researcher is going to have a great career. So we really want to invest in that researcher. It's really an investment in you. So that doesn't mean, you're a good or bad person. It's, what is your vision for your career? What are the skills you're trying to develop? What's the contribution that you want to make? For grants, it's much more about the work itself. What is the work that you want to do? What is it going to do for the science, for society, for, our understanding of something? It's really about what's at stake. I mean, that's kind of a good top level question to ask when you're thinking about your proposal. And sometimes that's hard. I think, nobody wants to stand up and say, I'm going to cure cancer, and nor should you. But you also should think about, it's almost like what would you tell your mom who's not in the field about the work that you're doing and why you're excited about it? That can help you kind of think about what's there. And then beyond the strength of the idea, it's your qualifications to do the work. So it can't just be, this is fabulous. It has to also be, I have the right background for this. It might be, I know this language, so I can, go out and do the archival work. It might be, I've developed these kinds of microscopy techniques. I hope that's right. The right way of talking about that. Whatever it is, to be able to do the work. And then, there's smaller things like budget and that sort of thing. But it's really about, what is the work or the investment that the funder is making, and how is it going to pay off?
Yeah, I think that really helps students to focus in and be clear as they go forward in this process. Can you highlight some of the advantages of securing funding for students?
Absolutely. So if you have a fellowship, you have a great deal of independence, and that's not a bad thing. It's a real asset to a PI to have a grad student on fellowship. It allows for more space and creativity in the kind of scientific work that's happening. Obviously, you don't have to be a teaching assistant, so you have more time for your own research. It's also, so if you're planning to go into academia, having a record of funding from the National Science Foundation, NIH, that can be really helpful in getting future funding. And you can think about this, if you're further along in your graduate career, you're kind of too far for a fellowship. Postdoc fellowships are also a really, really important thing that helps you kind of get in the pipeline for future funding. All of that is really useful. And I think it's just having space to think and to focus on your research is just, it's a gift. And it's really a mark that the agency has faith in you. And I should say, though, having gotten a fellowship or not getting a fellowship it doesn't mean your work's not good. It's, to some extent, a game of inches, because the margins of who gets funding are so low. But these are skills that you can work on. Not getting a fellowship doesn't mean you're not going to get funding later.
Yeah, that's so true. I really like that you highlighted the point of you can promote this to employers, including on your CV if you secure funding, so that you can make that part of your accomplishments. And if you don't secure funding, you understand the process. You're familiar with that. You have some skills that you can transfer, as you mentioned. So all wonderful parts of your professional development.
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, any kind of writing that you do that is, kind of accessible writing about your research is going to help with proposal writing, and vice versa. These skills are really useful. And it's not an easy process. It's not easy at all. I work with faculty writing grants. It's a muscle that you have to work, but it does have to be built.
Yeah, definitely. And I really appreciate that here at Lehigh, we have graduate writing support. So I appreciate the work that Yvonne Lee does and the work that your office does, and all of the different supports that are on campus for our graduate students.
Yeah, it's so great to have Yvonne on campus. And she and I work together to help support graduate student learning in this area. And we will definitely be doing different kinds of programming to help graduate students get better at this. It's also, advisors are also great resources in this area. Read their grants, ask them for feedback, ask them for ideas on where to apply. They've been through it. So that's always a good first step.
Yeah, which is the perfect lead into my final question, which I was wondering about some of the resources or tips that you give to students. So I know you mentioned some programming. Well, maybe talk a little bit more about what's available.
Yeah. So first of all, I would say is always talk to your advisor, because your advisor knows the subfield well. So they're going to point you in the kind of narrower directions. They can say, yes, apply for the NSF fellowship, but they'll also be able to talk to you about, what's going to happen when you're on your own. Here is the areas of NSF or the areas of NIH that you want to be thinking about. Yvonne Lee, who's the new director of graduate writing, always has writing support available. General writing support can be helpful as well. She and I are also going to work together on a kind of multi-month program to support students applying for the NSF Graduate Research Fellowship. So that is super useful. I think another resource can just be a fellow grad student, and they don't even need to be in your field. And in fact, sometimes the most helpful reader of a proposal draft is someone very far out of your field, because if they don't understand it, then you need to do something differently. So asking people to read drafts, reading other people's proposals, all of that is really useful and can help you build skills.
Those are amazing insights. I think utilizing all the resources that are available, and particularly, you mentioned even peers, right? There's students who've gone before who are familiar with this, or certainly even those out of your discipline who can give you a whole new perspective. I appreciate all of those suggestions.
Yeah, I think that's actually something that I learned as a humanities graduate student. Humanists sort of naturally form writing groups. It helps keep you on task. It helps get feedback. I think scientists it's just less of a common thing, but I think it's really, really helpful.
I agree. And the more that you strengthen those connections with individuals across disciplines, and by attending events and workshops and things of that sort, it's really going to enrich your perspective as well.
Yeah. And these are your colleagues, and they're going to be your colleagues going forward. I mean, I still have people from graduate school that I read drafts of their academic work. And, I think that those kinds of connections, they're going to help you throughout your career.
Definitely. I'm hearing that proposal writing, like so many things that we do in the professional world, it often takes some collaboration, right? It's, going it alone is going to make the whole task, less productive and more difficult. And so I think really tapping into those connections you have, the resources, using those around you as great sources of feedback.
Yeah. And I think, proposal writing, nonprofits need proposal writers, all kinds of different universities, broadly speaking, employ proposal writers. So there's a lot of career paths in this area if this is something that you find interesting.
Yeah, I appreciate you pointing that out. And there's certainly lots of different resources that, we could point you to, and there'll be some included as well. Thank you so much, Kate, for your time.
You're welcome.
You're such a wealth of knowledge, and appreciate all the strategies and tips that you've shared during this time. It's truly such an amazing resource for our graduate students.
Happy to do it.
Tune in next time to Grad Guidance, Career Tips and Tools for Graduate Students, where we'll be discussing lots of topics that are important for graduate students. Take care.
There are multiple opportunities at Lehigh to expand your knowledge on proposal writing. Learn more about funding opportunities using SPIN, the world's largest database of sponsored funding opportunities. Read funding stories from Lehigh students, and find events through the Graduate Education and Life Office to enhance your proposal writing skills. Check out the links below for more information. Here are some additional resources for proposal writing. Visit the National Science Foundation to find proposal and award policies and procedures guide. There are also special programs for graduate students for funding. Visit the National Institutes of Health to find guides, samples, and tools to prepare your application, as well as resources for understanding funding. Check out the links below for more information.